the Miami International Airport heist of 2005. The story begins not with grand criminal ambitions, but with a chance observation by an unlikely informant. In April 2005, Onelio Diaz, a security guard working for Brinks Security, made a startling discovery during his routine duties at Miami International Airport. What he witnessed would eventually lead to one of the most audacious heists in American history. Diaz noticed a glaring security vulnerability that seemed almost too obvious to be real. Every day, millions of dollars in cash money being transported from a German bank to the Miami branch of the U.S. Federal Reserves, it's virtually unprotected in a loading dock at the airport's cash processing facility. The routine was shockingly predictable. For approximately 2 hours each day, these enormous sums of money were left in an unair-conditioned loading dock with the doors wide open, counted by unarmed security guards who seemed oblivious to the treasure trove they were handling. The dock's location made it even more vulnerable. It was accessible to anyone driving down the airport road, with no significant barriers or checkpoints. The very banality of the operation, the casual way millions were handled like every day cargo, created a blind spot in what should have been an impenetrable security system. Onelio Diaz knew exactly who might be interested in this information. His friend Karls Monzon, a 32-year-old Cuban immigrant who worked as a truck driver. But Monzon wasn't a career criminal or a mastermind in the traditional sense. He was a family man facing a personal crisis that would drive him to consider the unthinkable. Monzon and his wife desperately wanted to adopt a child, but the legal and administrative costs were mounting beyond their means. The adoption process required significant financial resources that his truck driving salary simply couldn't provide. When Diaz approached him with the airport intelligence, knowing Karls needed money for the adoption, it planted a seed that would grow into something much larger. What made Monzon unique among heist masterminds was his complete lack of criminal experience. He had no connections to organized crime, no history of robbery, and no sophisticated criminal network. What he did have, however, was an unusual source of criminal education, an obsession with true crime television shows. Monzon's preparation for the heist was unlike anything law enforcement had seen before. Instead of learning from seasoned criminals or studying actual heist cases, he spent countless hours binge-watching crime shows like Law & Order, SVU, Dateline NBC, and various documentaries about famous robberies. He treated these programs like a criminal curriculum, taking mental notes on police investigative techniques, common mistakes made by perpetrators, and the forensic methods used to catch criminals. This television-based education gave him several advantages. He learned about the importance of avoiding DNA evidence, the dangers of spending stolen money too quickly, the value of maintaining normal routines after a crime, and the critical importance of keeping the criminal circle small and trusted. Most importantly, he learned how criminals typically got caught, information he would use to try to avoid their mistakes. Weeks of meticulous planning, beginning in the spring of 2005, Monzon embarked on an exhaustive reconnaissance mission that would span nearly 7 months. His surveillance of Miami International Airport wasn't the casual observation of an amateur criminal, but rather the systematic intelligence gathering of someone who had absorbed countless hours of crime television and understood the critical importance of preparation. Monzon's reconnaissance involved multiple phases of observation. He began by conducting drive-by surveillance, learning the basic layout of the airport's cargo and processing areas. He noted the locations of security cameras, the positioning of guard posts, and the general flow of traffic around the cash processing facility. This initial phase was designed to avoid detection while gathering basic intelligence about the target environment. As his confidence grew, Monzon escalated his surveillance activities. He began conducting foot reconnaissance, walking through areas of the airport that were accessible to the public. While carefully observing the cash processing operations from various vantage points, he studied the daily routines with scientific precision, noting that the most vulnerable period occurred consistently between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m., when the cash shipments from the German bank were being processed for transfer to the Federal Reserve. During his surveillance, Monzon discovered several critical details that would prove essential to the heist's success. He observed that the warehouse operated with a skeleton crew during the afternoon shift, typically consisting of just 2 or 3 unarmed security guards who were responsible for counting and organizing massive amounts of cash. These guards followed predictable patterns. taking breaks at regular intervals and becoming so accustomed to their routine that they rarely looked up. From their counting to observe their surroundings, Monzon also mapped the facility's physical security measures in detail. He noted the locations of security cameras, identified blind spots in the surveillance coverage, and observed that the loading dock doors remained open during processing hours due to the lack of air conditioning in the facility. This seemingly minor detail about ventilation would prove to be a crucial vulnerability that made the entire operation possible. The reconnaissance phase revealed that the cash processing facility was designed more for efficiency than security. The warehouse layout prioritized the smooth flow of money from incoming shipments to outgoing transfers, with minimal consideration for defending against a direct assault. The 42 canvas bags containing approximately $2.1 million. Each were stored in organized rows that made them easy to identify and access, but also made them extremely vulnerable to theft. Most importantly, Monzon's surveillance revealed the predictable timing of the operations. The cash shipments arrived at regular intervals, were processed according to a strict schedule, and remained vulnerable for a specific window each day. This predictability, which was designed to ensure efficient operations, created the opportunity that would make the heist possible. Assembling the crew. The process of assembling his crew revealed both Monzon's amateur status and his instinctive understanding of criminal security. Unlike professional criminals who might recruit from a network of experienced thieves, Monzon made the deliberate decision to build his team exclusively from his inner circle of family and trusted friends. This approach reflected his television-educated understanding that the greatest threat to any criminal enterprise came from participants who might cooperate with law enforcement or betray the operation for personal gain. The core crew consisted of 4 key participants, each selected for specific reasons that combined personal trust with practical skills. Victor Pereira emerged as Monzon's primary partner and the only other person who would actually enter the warehouse during the robbery. Pereira was chosen because of his close personal relationship with Monzon and his calm demeanor under pressure, qualities that Monzon had observed during their friendship and believed would be essential during the high-stressed moments of the actual heist. Jeffrey Boatwright, who was married to Monzon's wife's sister, became a crucial member of the crew despite initially being reluctant to participate. Boatwright's inclusion demonstrated how family relationships could create both opportunities and vulnerabilities in criminal enterprises. His connection to the Monzon family through marriage made him a trusted insider, but it also meant that his arrest would inevitably lead law enforcement directly to other family members. Cinnamon Monzon, Karl's wife, played a supporting role that would later prove legally significant. While she wasn't directly involved in the planning or execution of the robbery itself, her knowledge of the operation and her role in handling some of the stolen money would make her a target for prosecution. Her inclusion in the broader criminal enterprise demonstrated family loyalty could expand the legal consequences of criminal activity far beyond the primary participants. The recruitment process was gradual and careful, with Monzon slowly bringing each person into the conspiracy through a series of conversations that tested their commitment and reliability. He began with vague discussions about theoretical opportunities, gradually escalating to more specific planning conversations as he became confident in each person's willingness to participate. This methodical approach was designed to minimize the risk of someone reporting the planned crime to authorities before it could be executed. Onelio Diaz occupied a unique position within the crew as the inside informant, who made the entire operation possible. As a Brinks security guard with direct access to information about the cash processing facility's operations, Diaz provided the intelligence that transformed Monzon's vague criminal ambitions into a viable criminal plan. His ongoing employment at the facility meant he could provide real-time updates about security procedures, staffing levels, and the timing of cash shipments. The crew's composition created several strategic advantages that contributed to the heist's initial success. The tight family and friendship bonds meant that communication was easy and natural, making it less likely that their planning conversations would attract attention from outsiders. The personal relationships also created powerful incentives for maintaining secrecy, as betraying the operation would mean betraying not just criminal associates, but family members and close friends. However, the intimate nature of the crew also created significant vulnerabilities that would later contribute to the operation's downfall. The interconnected family relationships meant that once law enforcement identified one participant, they could quickly map the entire network through marriage records, phone records, and other documentation of personal relationships. The emotional bonds that made the crew initially trustworthy also created pressures and conflicts that professional criminals might be better equipped to manage. By November 2005, Monzon had developed what he believed was a foolproof plan. The date chosen, November 6, 2005, was selected based on his observations of the cash transport schedule and security patterns. He had determined that this particular day would offer the optimal window of opportunity based on staffing levels and the expected volume of cash being processed. The plan was elegantly simple, which Monzon believed was its greatest strength. The team would arrive during the vulnerable tower window when the cash was being counted in the open loading dock. They would present themselves as legitimate personnel, quickly overpower the minimal security presence, load the money, and escape before anyone could mount an effective response. Monzon's television education had taught him that elaborate plans often failed due to their complexity. Instead, he opted for a straightforward approach that relied on speed, timing, and the element of surprise rather than sophisticated criminal techniques. November 6, 2005. A brazen daylight robbery. The execution of the Miami airport heist began at exactly 3 p.m. on November 6, 2005. During the peak vulnerability window that Monzon had identified through months of careful surveillance. The timing was no accident. This was the precise moment when the facility's security was most relaxed and the maximum amount of cash was present and accessible. The crew arrived at the airport in a pickup truck. Following the route that Monzon had rehearsed multiple times during his reconnaissance phase, the vehicle choice was deliberate. Pickup trucks were common in the airport. Cargo areas and would unattract attention from security personnel who were accustomed to seeing commercial vehicles throughout the day. However, the execution immediately encountered its first complication when the getaway driver, overcome by nervousness, initially froze and forgot to drive directly to the loading dock as planned. This momentary hesitation could have compromised the entire operation, but the crew managed to recover and proceed to the target location without attracting unwanted attention. Monzon and Victor Pereira were the two crew members designated to actually enter the warehouse and confront the security personnel. Both men covered their faces with masks, though Monzon would later lose his mask during the heist. Critical mistake that would provide law enforcement with crucial evidence. Armed with handguns, they burst through the open loading dock doors and immediately took control of the situation. Inside the warehouse, they found exactly what Diaz's intelligence had predicted. A small crew of unarmed security guards engaged in the routine counting and processing of enormous sums of cash. The guards, who had become complacent due to the routine nature of their work, were completely unprepared for an armed robbery. Monzon and Pereira shouted commands for everyone to get on the floor, and the security personnel immediately complied without offering any resistance. The warehouse contained 42 canvas bags, each weighing approximately 38 pounds and containing roughly $2.1 million in cash. These bags were organized in neat rows, making them easy to identify and access. The sheer volume of money created both an opportunity and a logistical challenge. While there was far more cash available than the crew could possibly carry, they had to make quick decisions about which bags to take while under extreme time pressure. Monzon and Pereira grabbed 6 bags of cash, making rapid selections based on their weight and accessibility rather than any systematic evaluation of their contents. The physical demands of the robbery were significant. Each bag weighed nearly 40 pounds, making them difficult to carry quickly over any distance. As they rushed toward the loading dock with their stolen cargo, one of the bags dropped and fell to the warehouse floor. In a decision that demonstrated both the time pressure they were under and their commitment to escape over maximizing their haul, they left the dropped bag behind, rather than risk additional exposure by stopping to retrieve it. This abandoned bag contained approximately $2.1 million, but the crew prioritized speed over completeness in their escape. The remaining 5 bags were quickly loaded into the bed of the pickup truck. The entire operation inside the warehouse had taken less than 10 minutes from entry to exit, demonstrating the effectiveness of their preparation and the vulnerability of the facility's security arrangements. The guards remained on the floor throughout the robbery, following the robbers' commands and making no attempt to resist or raise an alarm during the actual theft. As Monzon and Pereira ran from the warehouse to their vehicle, Monzon's mask fell off, exposing his face to any security cameras that might be recording the scene. This critical error would later provide law enforcement with crucial evidence for identifying him as one of the primary perpetrators. However, in the immediate aftermath of the robbery, the crew was unaware of this potentially damaging mistake. The escape. The escape from Miami International Airport proceeded according to Monzon's carefully rehearsed plan, though not without complications that would later prove significant. The crew drove away from the cash processing facility with 5 bags containing approximately $7.4 million, successfully leaving the airport complex before security personnel could organize an effective response or alert law enforcement to the robbery in progress. The immediate escape route had been planned and practiced during the reconnaissance phase, with Monzon identifying multiple exit routes from the airport that would minimize their exposure to security checkpoints and surveillance systems. The crew took advantage of the airport's size and complexity, using service roads and cargo areas to avoid the main terminal zones where security presence was heaviest. However, the escape was complicated by several factors that hadn't been fully anticipated during the planning phase. The weight of the stolen cash, approximately 190 pounds of money in heavy canvas bags, created logistical challenges that affected their ability to move quickly and efficiently. The physical burden of transporting such a large amount of cash would continue to complicate their efforts to hide and distribute the stolen money in the days and weeks following the robbery. Once away from the immediate airport area, the crew proceeded to predetermine locations where the money would be divided and hidden. This phase of the operation revealed the strengths and weaknesses of Monzon's television-educated approach to criminal planning. He had correctly understood the importance of dispersing the stolen money to prevent law enforcement from recovering the entire haul if part of the operation was discovered. However, he had underestimated the practical challenges of managing such a large amount of cash among multiple people with varying levels of criminal sophistication. The division of the stolen money took place at secure locations that had been identified during the planning phase. Monzon's strategy was to split the cash among the crew members and hide it in multiple locations, making it more difficult for law enforcement to recover even if they identified some of the participants. Each crew member received their share with instructions to avoid spending large amounts quickly or making purchases that would attract attention. The crew dispersed according to their predetermined plan, with each member returning to their normal routines while carrying millions of dollars in stolen cash. This return to normalcy was a crucial element of Monzon's post-heist strategy. Based on his understanding from crime, shows that dramatic changes in behavior or lifestyle were often the factors that led law enforcement to criminal suspects. In the immediate aftermath of the heist, the crew appeared to have achieved a perfect crime. They had successfully stolen $7.4 million from one of the most secure facilities in the United States, escaped without detection, and dispersed the evidence in a way that made recovery extremely difficult. The security guards had been unable to provide detailed descriptions of the robbers, and the speed of the operation had minimized the amount of evidence left at the crime scene. However, unknown to the crew, several factors would soon begin working against them. Monzon's lost mask had potentially exposed him to surveillance cameras. The inside connection, through Onelio Diaz, created a direct link between the crime and identifiable individuals, and the large amount of stolen cash would prove difficult to hide and manage over the long term. The escape that appeared clean in the immediate aftermath would gradually reveal complications that would ultimately lead to the operation's downfall. The investigation. The robbery of $7.4 million from Miami International Airport immediately triggered a massive federal investigation that would ultimately involve multiple law enforcement agencies and sophisticated investigative techniques. The FBI took primary jurisdiction over the case due to the federal nature of the crime. The theft had occurred at an international airport and involved money being transported between federal financial institutions. The initial investigation faced significant challenges that reflected both the crew's careful planning and the inherent difficulties of investigating such a brazen crime. The robbery had been executed with remarkable speed and efficiency, leaving behind minimal physical evidence and few useful witness accounts. The security guards who had been present during the robbery were able to provide only general descriptions of the perpetrators. As both robbers had been masked, and the entire confrontation had lasted less than 10 minutes. However, federal investigators brought substantial resources and expertise to the case that would gradually overcome these initial obstacles. The FBI assembled a task force that included specialists in airport security, financial crimes, and organized criminal enterprises. This team began a systematic investigation that would eventually uncover the connections and evidence needed to identify and prosecute the perpetrators. The investigation's first major breakthrough came through the recovery and analysis of surveillance footage from the airport's extensive camera system. While the robbers had attempted to avoid detection, airport's multiple overlapping surveillance systems captured various aspects of their operation. Most importantly, investigators discovered footage showing Monzon's face when his mask fell off during the escape from the warehouse. This surveillance evidence provided investigators with their first concrete clear image of one of the perpetrators that could be used for identification purposes. However, identifying an unknown individual from surveillance footage remained a significant challenge, requiring investigators to develop additional leads that would connect the image to a specific suspect. The FBI's investigation also focused on the insider connection that had made the robbery possible. The precision of the crew's knowledge about the facility's operations and the timing of their attack suggested that they had received inside information from someone familiar with the cash processing procedures. This insight led investigators to begin systematic interviews with current and former employees of the cash processing facility and its associated security companies. Investigators also began analyzing the financial and communication patterns of individuals who might have been involved in planning or executing the robbery. This included examining phone records, financial transactions, and other data that might reveal connections between potential suspects. The FBI's financial crimes expertise proved crucial in understanding how the stolen money might be hidden, laundered, or spent in ways that could provide investigative leads. Despite Monzon's careful planning and television-inspired precautions, the heists began to unravel through a combination of human nature, greed, and the inherent challenges of managing such a large criminal operation. The very success of the robbery created new problems that Monzon's crime show education had unfully prepared him to handle. The first cracks in the operation appeared when some crew members began to deviate from the careful post-heist protocols that Monzon had established. The temptation to spend or flaunt their newfound wealth proved stronger than the discipline required to maintain their cover. Small indiscretions, unusual purchases, lifestyle changes, or careless comments began to create a trail that investigators could follow. The FBI's investigation gained significant momentum when confidential informants began reporting conversations about the airport robbery within Miami's criminal and social networks. These reports indicated that someone named Karls Monzon had been heard discussing plans for or accomplishment of the robbery, providing investigators with their first concrete lead, connecting a specific individual to the crime. The informant reports were particularly valuable because they revealed that Monzon had been unable to keep his involvement in the robbery completely secret. Despite his television-educated understanding of the importance of maintaining operational security, the magnitude of his achievement and the stress of managing such a large criminal operation had apparently led him to make incautious comments that reached the ears of law enforcement informants. Based on these initial leads, the FBI began intensive surveillance of Karls Monzon and his known associates. This surveillance operation revealed the family and friendship connections that form the core of the criminal enterprise, allowing investigators to identify Jeffrey Boatwright, Cinnamon Monzon, and other potential participants in the robbery conspiracy. The investigation reached a crucial turning point when the FBI obtained judicial authorization for wiretaps on the phones of suspected participants. These wiretaps provided investigators with unprecedented insight into the crew's post-heist activities, their concerns about law enforcement attention, and their efforts to manage and hide the stolen money. The wiretapped conversations revealed the intimate family connections within the crew and provided evidence of their ongoing criminal conspiracy to conceal the stolen funds. The wiretap evidence also revealed that the crew was struggling with the practical challenges of managing such a large amount of stolen cash. The conversations intercepted by law enforcement showed that the participants were having difficulty spending or investing the money without attracting attention. and that tensions were developing among crew members over the division and management of their criminal proceeds. Most critically, the FBI's investigation identified Onelio Diaz as the inside informant who had made the robbery possible. Diaz's employment with Brinks Security and his relationship with Karls Monzon created a direct evidentiary link between the robbery and identifiable suspects. Once investigators focused on Diaz's role, they were able to trace the flow of inside information that had enabled the crew to target the facility with such precision. The FBI also offered a substantial reward of $150,000 for information, leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for the robbery. This reward proved effective in encouraging additional witnesses and informants to come forward with information about the crew's activities and the location of the stolen money. The combination of wiretap evidence, informant reports, and the financial incentive created multiple sources of information that investigators could use to build their case. The arrests. Coordinated arrests that brought down the Miami airport heist crew took place on February 17, 2006, more than 3 months after the robbery. The timing of these arrests reflected the FBI's methodical approach to building an airtight case against all participants while maximizing the recovery of stolen funds and preventing the destruction of evidence. On that February morning, federal agents executed simultaneous arrest warrants across the Miami area, taking into custody the key figures in what had been one of the most successful airport robberies in American history. The synchronized nature of the arrests was designed to prevent any of the suspects from warning others or destroying evidence once law enforcement began making arrests. Karls Monzon, the 34-year-old mastermind of the operation, was arrested at his residence along with his wife, Cinnamon Monzon, who was 30 years old at the time of her arrest. The arrest of both husband and wife demonstrated how the family-based nature of the criminal enterprise had expanded legal liability beyond just the primary participants in the actual robbery. Jeffrey Boatwright, the 32-year-old brother-in-law, who had been recruited into the crew through family connections, was also arrested as part of the coordinated operation. His arrest confirmed investigators' understanding of the interconnected family relationships that formed the foundation of the criminal conspiracy. Onelio Diaz, the 28-year-old Brinks security guard, whose inside information had made the entire operation possible, was arrested on charges that reflected his crucial role as the insider who had provided the intelligence necessary for the robbery's success. Diaz's arrest was particularly significant because it confirmed the FBI's theory about how the crew had obtained such detailed knowledge of the facility's vulnerabilities and operational procedures. In total, 7 individuals were arrested in connection with the heist, representing the complete criminal network that had planned, executed, and concealed the robbery. The breadth of the arrests demonstrated the FBI's thorough investigation and their success in mapping the entire criminal enterprise from the initial planning stages through the post-robbery efforts to hide the stolen money. The arrests were accompanied by extensive searches of the suspects' homes, vehicles, and other properties. These searches were designed to recover stolen money, gather additional evidence of the conspiracy, and prevent the destruction of materials that might be useful in prosecuting the case. However, despite these extensive searches, law enforcement was able to recover only a small fraction of the stolen funds. The arrest warrants detailed the extensive evidence that the FBI had gathered during their investigation, including surveillance footage, wiretap recordings, informant reports, and financial records that connected the suspects to the robbery and its aftermath. This evidence package reflected months of intensive investigative work and demonstrated the comprehensive nature of the case that prosecutors would present at trial. The arrests effectively ended what had appeared to be a perfect crime, transforming the crew from successful criminals enjoying their illegal profits into defendants facing decades in federal prison. The speed and coordination of the arrests prevented any of the suspects from fleeing or destroying evidence, ensuring that the full scope of their criminal enterprise would be exposed during the subsequent legal proceedings. The story of the Miami airport heist didn't end with the arrests. In a dark turn that echoed the aftermath of famous heists like the Lufthansa robbery, violence began to consume some of those connected to the crime. The enormous sum of money involved created dangerous temptations and suspicions within the criminal network. In December 2005, just a month after the heist, gang members abducted one of the participants, demanding a ransom of $1 million. The victim was severely beaten and required hospitalization. This incident revealed that the success of the original robbery had attracted the attention of other criminal elements, who saw an opportunity to profit from the heist's proceeds through extortion and violence. The legal proceedings that followed resulted in significant prison sentences for the participants. 4 men were sentenced to substantial prison terms for their roles in what prosecutors called one of the biggest heists in Florida history. The sentences reflected both the scale of the theft and the brazen nature of the daylight. Robbery at a major international airport. Karls Monzon, as the mastermind of the operation, faced the most serious charges and received a lengthy prison sentence. His transformation from family man seeking adoption funds to the leader of a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise became a cautionary tale about how desperate circumstances and criminal opportunity can intersect with devastating consequences. An unsolved mystery. Despite the arrests and convictions, one of the most significant aspects of the case remained unresolved: the location of most of the stolen money. While authorities recovered some of the $7.4 million, the majority remained missing, presumably hidden by the participants before their arrests, or possibly taken by others who learned of the heist's success. The missing money became a source of ongoing frustration for law enforcement and fascination for true crime enthusiasts. Various theories emerged about what happened to the funds, whether they were hidden in safe locations known only to the participants, spent before the arrests, or seized by other criminal elements attracted by the heist's notoriety. The Miami International Airport heist of 2005 became a case study in both criminal audacity and the inevitability of justice. Monzon's unusual preparation method, learning criminal techniques from television. Crime shows demonstrated both the accessibility of criminal education in the modern media age and its ultimate limitations. When applied to real-world criminal enterprises, the case also highlighted significant security vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure operations. The ease with which the robbers accessed millions of dollars in cash revealed systemic weaknesses in airport security protocols and cash handling procedures. These revelations led to reviews and improvements in security measures at cash processing facilities nationwide. For law enforcement, the case demonstrated the continued effectiveness of traditional investigative techniques, cultivating informants, following money trails, and exploiting the human weaknesses that ultimately cause most criminal enterprises to collapse. Despite Monzon's television-inspired attempts to avoid common criminal mistakes, the fundamental challenges of managing a large-scale criminal operation with multiple participants proved insurmountable. Beyond the financial loss and legal consequences, the Miami airport heist extracted a significant human cost from all involved. Families were destroyed, relationships were shattered, and lives were permanently altered by the brief moments of criminal action on November 6, 2005. Monzon's original motivation: securing funds for an adoption to start or expand. His family ended up destroying the family life he had been trying to improve. The irony of this outcome became one of the most poignant aspects of the entire story, demonstrating how criminal solutions to legitimate problems often create far greater difficulties than they solve. The case serves as a reminder that even the most carefully planned crimes carry enormous risks that extend far beyond the immediate participants, affecting families, communities, and institutions in ways that the original perpetrators rarely anticipate or consider. Epilogue: The Miami airport heist has continued to capture public attention years after the arrests and convictions. The case was featured in Netflix's documentary series Heist, which brought Monzon's story to a new generation of viewers fascinated by true crime narratives. The combination of elements: the desperate family man turned criminal mastermind, the television-educated robbery plan, the brazen daylight execution at a major airport, and the mysterious fate of most of the stolen money, created a story that transcends typical crime reporting to become part of American criminal folklore. Today, the case stands as both a testament to criminal audacity and a cautionary tale about the consequences of choosing illegal solutions to life's challenges. The empty spaces where the missing millions once resided continue to fuel speculation and investigation, ensuring that the Miami International Airport heist remains an active part of both law enforcement files and public fascination. Subscribe for this and many more stories.